Well, good morning, everyone. Greetings in Christ's name this morning. It's good to be here. The house is well filled this morning. Plenty of people here. That's good. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for all your support over the last 2 months when we were in captivity. A lot of people had special prayer services specifically for us. So thanks a lot for that. We could definitely feel your prayers, and it made a difference, I believe. In fact, I know it did. So I was asked to share my story here, and this is going to be my story from my perspective. If you heard a recording of my story, this isn't going to be a whole lot different, but maybe there'll be a little bit. So yeah, this is going to be my story from my perspective. Others have given their stories, testimonies, and those you can find on social media. Some are on YouTube. Barry's is very interesting as far as if you want perspective on what it was like being the middleman between the gang and Cam. That one was very interesting, answered a lot of my questions. I had a lot of questions from where I was at. Thank you also for the support for our families. I had a couple brothers up here in northern Indiana. I'm sure you guys have spent a lot of time praying for my family. Thank you for that. So, we'll just get into this. I don't know how long this is going to take. So we'll start off with the time I spent in Haiti. I went to Haiti September of 2020. So I was there about 13 months before we got kidnapped. And that last year, working in Haiti, working with the team there, working with Barry, and all the things that we were involved with, it was a very difficult year. A lot of changes, a lot of internal issues with programs as well as with employees. We changed a lot of programs just because they weren't having the effect that we wanted them to have. After 30 years of handing out food boxes, these people are still needing a food box. Is there anything that we can change to where these people can be more independent? We were changing a lot of programs to be more involved with ministry instead of just humanitarian aid. And we rehauled a lot of stuff. The Haitian employees, a lot of them weren't on board with it. We ended up shutting down, telling them all to go home. We interviewed all of them individually after that, a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings, and we ended up hiring only about half of them back. So it was a very difficult time, but then when we got the internal issues sort of figured out, we had a goal in mind. Everyone that was there was on board, and it was a blessing. We were united there inside CAM, and we were making things happen, working with gangs. So Haiti is divided up into a bunch of different zones, and every zone has a gang or maybe two gangs. And so there's gangs everywhere. Titayan was a couple miles down the road, and we were working with the gang there in Titayan. There was also a gang just on the other side of the fence there at Cam. That was the Philadelphia gang, and they proved to be a little violent over the last year, but we sort of got into an agreement with them. There's also Soissons-Dix, was just a little bit further down the road. Another gang. The gang that kidnapped us, Gatsan Maozu, they were the biggest gang that I've ever seen. They had access to all kinds of vehicles and big guns. Definitely had people fairly high up and influential, but they were 20 minutes from Cam, so we had no contact with this gang, hadn't been working with it before. So some of the stuff that we would do with gangs, the Titayan gang, we would give them work. We had a program called Work for Wages. Donors really liked to donate to this program. Basically, it gave these people something to do. So when you don't have work and you grow up on the street, you don't know who your mom and dad is, and you're trying to find your way in life. You get into your teens, someone hands you a gun, this is exciting. You have no really training on what's right and wrong. You're pretty much automatically a gangster. So that's what happens with a lot of people in Haiti. A lot of the boys that grow up, they want to try to find fulfillment in life. There's a gang that they can always join, and they sort of find some kind of fulfillment in that. And that's sort of what makes all the gangs around there. So we were trying to get these guys to get something else to do besides blocking roads and making chaos. We would give them work like flattening dirt roads, filling in the ditches, picking the rocks off, and also erosion control. And then for the Titayan gang, we started a preaching service every other Friday night, and that was a blessing. A couple times it got pretty interesting. I think one time Barry had a gun pulled on him, but other than that, it went pretty well. And there toward the end, the gang leader, he's like 23, 24, something like that, and he would sit in those preaching services with tears streaming down his face. The Lord was definitely working in his life. We were definitely making an impact on the gang there in Titayan. The one just across the fence there in Philadelphia, we had decided to build a wall all the way around Cam. We had one wall on the back side, but we decided to put it on the other three sides. And they said that we can't build it unless we pay them like $100,000 or something pretty drastic. We told them we can't work like that. They showed up with guns and sticks and told us that we got to back off. We told them we're not going to work like that. They wanted also us to give them work like we were working with the Titayan gang. We're threatening us if we didn't give them that kind of work. We told them we can't work with people like that. If you want to work with us, you're going to have to be decent, act like humans. If you're shoving guns in our face, threatening us, we're not going to give you anything. We won't build the wall, but we're not going to give you anything either. So they backed off on the price. They said, okay, you can build the wall if you give us $50,000. And it went all the way down to, they finally just said, just give us a food box. And we said, we can't give you anything. And then one day, when all this was sort of coming to a close, and they were basically going to let us start building, Barry, myself, and Ryan, and a translator, I'm not sure if Matt was along or not, I need to ask him. But we decided, we had a meeting with the Titayan gang, and then on the way back we stopped at the Philadelphia gang's leader's house. We just stopped in there, we had a meeting with him, and he said, yeah, you guys can build your wall, we'll stay out of it, we won't cause you any issues. And Barry just got serious with him. This guy is 30-some years old. Gangsters don't often live that long just due to all the violence and fighting. Usually they get shot before they go much past 30. It's just the way it works. And Barry just got serious with him. He said, look, you need to change your lifestyle. You're going to get shot. And just for your own good, you need to change your life. You need Jesus in your life to give you purpose, and just really laid it out to him. I mean, he said, if you die, you're going to lose everything. You think it's bad now, you just wait till after you die without Jesus, and you're going to really, really regret it. And had the guy really thinking. And Barry said, we want to start preaching back here. If you can find a location for us to have a service, it doesn't have to be anything. It can be just underneath a tree to begin with. After a while, maybe we can put up a building or something temporary. And he said, sure, I'll find something, and you can have services back here. We won't harass you with the wall anymore. So we left there on good terms, and it wasn't long till after we left, we got a phone call, and someone said that that gang leader and his cousin that was there were just shot. So I think Barry and Curtis drove back to investigate a little bit, and yeah, they were both. Someone had just pulled up and just shot them both. So we had a lot of history of working with gangs there around Kim, but no history much further than that. And the gangs are totally covering the country, so you go a couple miles away from Kim and they probably don't know anything about Kim. So the Saturday morning before, the Saturday that we got kidnapped, there was an orphanage that we decided to go visit. It was an orphanage that we were supporting. I think it was the only orphanage that we were supporting at the time. Orphanages wasn't really a thing that we wanted to support because in Haiti it's a business, and if you can get people to help you, support you, then you've got a business. And also, if the children don't look too great, they're a little shabby, the environment has some needs, the next white person that comes along, you can probably talk him into supporting you too, and then the next white person that comes along the same way. So orphanages were something that we weren't really big into. This particular orphanage was sort of organized by a Holderman Mennonite group in the States. It was very cleaned up, nice environment. The children were well taken care of, and just a good environment. We liked it, the setting, the teaching that was there for the children. And so, being this orphanage hadn't been giving us any trouble, we'd been supporting it for years and years. We just sort of kept it on the program. But once a year we would go visit it just to take pictures of the children and update our files, who was there, who wasn't there. And it was about that time of the year to go do that again. So it was decided that we would leave October 16 on a Saturday, and we all decided to go. Most of us there at the compound wanted to go. Barry stayed back and Ray stayed back. He was getting ready for the service the next day on Sunday. We were planning a communion service, and he was preparing for that, planning that out. So his wife went along, as well as all his children that were in Haiti. He had 5 children in Haiti. So we got up that morning. It was a beautiful morning, sunny. We gathered out by my shop, or by the shop there, and gathered around in a circle. Ray led us in a word of prayer, committed the day to the Lord, and those of us that were ready to go, which was most of the compound, got in the van. It was just a flat-nosed Toyota, about the size of a minivan, but you could get close to 20 people in it if you crammed a little bit. So we went to the orphanage and had a good time there, playing with the children. And then on the way back, we had probably left the orphanage maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I was sitting in the front passenger side. Dale, the Canadian, was driving. Sheldon, the 6-year-old, was sitting in between us. And we were going down the road. I noticed there wasn't a lot of vehicles on the road, which is not often a good sign. If you see vehicles coming, that means the road's open ahead of you. So we were going on at a pretty good clip. We knew this part of the road could be potentially dangerous. But I had driven it before, and there wasn't really anything. Nothing had happened yet. White people wasn't really somebody that gangsters would kidnap. Usually they were looking for Haitians working for white people. to kidnap if they were going to kidnap. So we were going along at a pretty good clip, and we come around a corner or around a curve, and there's a little box truck up ahead of us, parked sideways across the road, and a bunch of guys with guns around there, around the box truck there. I could tell pretty quick they weren't police. They were, some had dreadlocks and T-shirts and just every day. They didn't have uniforms like police usually do. And we were still a little ways from it, maybe 200 yards or something. And Dale quickly stopped, and he's like, "What should we do?" I said, "Let's just turn around and get out of here." So he did. He quick turned around, and we were heading out, going the other direction, and we were just taking off when a white Ford Ranger came flying up the side and drove right in front of us, cut us off, and they had 2 guys in the bed with guns. There was a barrel sticking out of every window. It was a 4-door pickup truck. Definitely very well armed. I think if they weren't pointing their guns at us, they were wanting to. Both Dale and I were in the front, so we had our hands up in the windshield where they could see them. And they turned us around. They told us to spin around, go back the direction we had been going. So we did. We get up there to where they had the box truck. By this time, they had the box truck driven off the road, and they motioned us to follow it. And then they came in behind it with the Ford Ranger, and we were in the middle. The little box truck, then it was us, then it was the Ford Ranger. And we were driving back there, and Dale wasn't really in a hurry. We didn't know where we were going necessarily. So all of a sudden, someone comes running up the side, or there were people around there too. Anyway, they told us to stop, opened the door, yanked Dale out, gave him a big whack across the face, haul him off, and one of the gangsters jumps in the driver's seat and takes off, and he was definitely in a hurry. So we went back the road a little piece till we got to the place that we called the Circle. I think I only saw it one time after that. And they stopped. It was just a big, I don't know, maybe 2-3 acres of flat dirt, and they just pulled us off right in there. The little box truck was there too. And then they were trying to assess the situation. They had us surrounded. There were guns everywhere. I was pretty sure they were going to open up. I wasn't looking around too much, just it looked bad. They opened the doors, asked for money. They took all our American money, but they didn't want any of our Haitian money. They later took that then. But they had us there for a while, and I think they were just deciding what to do with us. The whole van was full of white people, and at that time in Haiti, there was hardly any white person there. If you met a white person, like for myself, if I would meet a white person, I would sort of feel like I should go talk to him, just because it might be 2-3 weeks before you'd see another one. You wouldn't see one every time you went into town. They were very scarce. And here they had a whole van load of white people. So yeah, they were probably confused and weren't sure what to do, and they finally took us further back in to this location right here. They stopped right in between those 2 buildings and then unloaded us all up. Now, I'm not sure what they were deciding by that time. It didn't look good at all. They lined us up in front of that bottom building on the far side. Right here across this wall. They just lined us up, took a video of us. I figured this is probably going to go on Facebook and they're going to show the world what they caught. We were singing the song that we just sung, The Angel of the Lord, while they were taking that video. And after that, they took us to this door right here with the post and the rock, and they had hauled 2 people out of there when we pulled up. And those people were tied hand and foot behind their backs, and they hobbled them out of there. I'm not sure where they went. I don't think we ever saw them again. They took off our shoes, put us into that door. That house is about a 10 by 20, and it has 2 rooms inside. There's a porch on this side, and it also goes about halfway back. So it goes around the corner there. And the rooms inside were about a 10 by 12, and there were 2 rooms. There was a wall through the middle with a door that had a piece of tin across it to divide us. So they put us into that room. It was pretty crammed, and closed the door and barricaded it. It was a concrete house with a tin roof. You couldn't see out of it, no windows. It got hot and stuffy, hardly any ventilation. And there were people on the other side of that wall. There were 11 other hostages. Most of those were Dominicans. There were 2 Chinese in there that they were holding for ransom as well. So about a day after we were in there, they brought us a big roll of sort of paper towels. They were more paper than they were towel, so they're fairly easier to write on, or a lot easier to write on than regular paper towels. And I had a pen on me, so I was able to keep a diary, and I'll be reading some of that this morning. And I'll probably just start now. So October 16, Saturday, there was Ryan and Melody and their whole family, Andre and Laura. Andre was 3, Laura was 8 months old. And then Matt and Rachel, they were a couple. And then it was Cheryl, Ray's wife, and then her children, Sherilyn, Courtney, Brandon, Cassandra, and Sheldon. And then there was a older single lady, Kay, and then there were single guys, Sam, Dale, Austin, and myself. So just before they took us into that house there, they took all our stuff, all our phones, all our money that we had, including our Haitian money. And all we had was a diaper bag that they had gone through and taken out what they wanted to take out. And some of I believe it was Sherilyn, Courtney, and Brandon had watches. We had 3 or 4 watches, and those came in really handy. So later that night, they brought us food. They had us make a phone call to Barry. We told him we were all okay and all together. No one was hungry. And an English-speaking guy showed up. He was a Haitian American. He said he was an American citizen. He could talk pretty good English. It sounded like he came off the streets of New York, but he could definitely talk very good English. We later nicknamed him Santa Claus. He translated some stuff clearly that the gangsters were saying and told us he would come back with American snacks and drinks. They brought us mattresses and fans. It was super hot in the unventilated room. Later that night, the guards let 1 mattress outside, and 4 of us slept a little outside. That was when we finally had enough room to all lay down. We had a diaper bag along that they gave back to us. It had some ibuprofen, Band-Aids, extra clothes for the children, and about $20 worth of Haitian money left in it, and a couple other odds and ends. They had obviously missed the money. October 17, the next day, would have been a Sunday. The Sunday that we had planned to have communion back at Kim. It was a nice morning. Sam overheard the chief of our guard say that these Americans are no joke. He must have felt a little scared. We spent a lot of time singing and praying. Santa Claus showed up with 1 or 2 boxes of all kinds of American snacks. There was even ice cream. That was the first time we felt comfortable to eat. They had brought us greasy spaghetti that morning, and we couldn't touch it. We didn't feel like eating at all. So another thing on these, like Santa Claus, these guards could talk very little English. They could say, "Good morning, how are you?" But sometimes they would tell you good morning when it was time to go to bed, so I'm not even sure if they knew what that meant. So we could talk English, and they wouldn't really know what we were talking about. We talked about escaping right in front of them, and they had no idea what we were talking about. But about the only time they would ask us to translate what we were saying was when they heard their name being used, or a few other key things, like they borrowed a couple words from the English language in their language. So we decided to give them all nicknames so that we can talk about whoever we want, whenever we want. So I made a list of them. I'm not sure if I have all of them, but I think I have most of them. And I'll just read those off to you. We had Beanie, Papa Wheelie, Ping, and Chef Law would have been the same guy. Everyone called him Chef Law. He was sort of the chief of the guards there. We tried a bunch of different nicknames on him. They never seemed to fit. We tried stuff like Yellow Socks, Indian. Just nothing really seemed to fit until one day, and this would have been fairly later on. He came with a hairdo with his hair tied up in a bunch of little pigtails sticking out in random directions. And if you ever read the story of Ping, there's that Chinese picture of that Chinese boy on the boat. And so one of us said Ping, and it stuck ever since. So he was Ping ever since that. Froggy, there was Carrot Top, Archie, Henry, Charlie Horse and Loopy were the same guy. Zigzag, we had a Loopy too. Attitude, Santa Claus, Rookie, Eeyore, Billy Gaius, Ski Mask, and Dylan. Eeyore got his nickname because he constantly kept losing his clothes. All right, and the next day, October 18, Monday, they brought us a generator, strung up a few light bulbs precariously here and there. Sam is preaching every night in Creole to just anyone that was around to listen. October 19, Tuesday, boring day. We walked around in a circle in the little area we occupied to get some exercise. There was a mud flap laying around in the yard. During the afternoon, Matt went out there, picked it up, held it like a gun, told the guards he'd stand watch, they could all go sleep. That was the first time we had a good laugh. Cheryl also got one of the guards to pull up his pants. They would always walk around with their pants way down. We all clapped and cheered. These guards must think we're the craziest people they ever saw. October 20, Wednesday. Ryan came out of bed this morning singing on B-O-R-E-D in the tune of the B-I-B-L-E. We're washing our clothes in a black tub and hanging them on a wire line to dry. October 21, Thursday, boring day. October 22, Friday. This morning we all felt like Austin described stale pretzels. Later on in the day we made contact with Barry, maybe 30 seconds or so, through a chef's phone. There's less and less guards openly. In Creole that's pronounced chef, so in English it's chief. I'll try to pronounce that correctly. There's less and less guards openly carrying guns around. That was an amazing thing. They figured out that we were nonviolent people, and we would just openly ask them questions. What do you do with your gun? You shoot people with it? And they'd back off. No, we don't shoot people with it. Or at least not white people. And then they started figuring out that they could get around better if they didn't have a gun on them. We would always point them out and accuse them of shooting people. They didn't seem to like that too well. So we got a little bit of respect going on there. They started respecting us. They also started to hate Sam a lot more through that. But that was pretty interesting. They would, Chef Lauer Ping actually told one of the guards, he was up talking with the group toward the end of the kidnapping, just having a discussion, and he had an AR. By this time, we're pretty calloused with having guns pointed at us all day long. And he told the guy to go put his gun somewhere else before he comes and talks to us. He actually ran the guy off. Told him, go put your gun somewhere else if you want to talk to these people. So that was pretty amazing. October 23, Saturday. Boring day, walked a mile in circles. So we stepped off a circle, and this was between the two houses there. We would walk in a circle around there, sometimes out to the outhouse, and we would step it off to step off a mile, and then we would clock it with a watch, see how long it would take us to walk that. And that's how we figured out if we ever get a chance to run, we could figure out how quickly we could put a mile behind us. We could walk a mile in about 16 minutes, which was about 4 miles an hour. It was a pretty good clip. October 24, another Sunday, or the next Sunday. Austin shared a little devotional. We had some sharing time, all of us, and spent the rest of the time singing and praying. There were some different colored bottle caps laying around in the dirt, so Dale and I washed some up and we played checkers. They released a few of the people in the other room tonight. So the hostages that they had in the second room there in that house, they released 5 of those that night. We had been making some contact underneath the tin door that was between the 2 rooms. There was a 3-4 inch strip on the bottom that we could talk to. The one guy in there was a Haitian American. He could talk some English. We shared water and some snacks, stuff that we got in underneath the door, and as well as a couple Haitian tracts, and they really enjoyed when we were singing. One day we were pretty down, and we didn't sing all day, I believe, and they asked us, what's wrong? You guys aren't singing today. So the next day we tried to step it up a little bit. October 25, Monday. This morning we decided to have 3 times a day for prayer. Brandon set an alarm on his watch for 1 o'clock p.m. The English-speaking guy came again with another box of goodies. We sang him the song There Is Beyond the Azure Blue, and he videoed parts of it. We figured this video would probably go viral if he posted it, but I have never seen it. October 26, Tuesday. Boring day. The guards were really worked up about something being said on the radio. We couldn't quite figure it out. We didn't know Haitian Creole well enough. Sam and I were the most fluent, but we couldn't quite figure out what all they were saying on the radio. They would talk fast and they would use bigger words than what we were used to in our day-to-day vocabulary. October 27, Wednesday. About 7 p.m., it was after dark. We got moved to a different location. On the truck radio, it sounded like the U.S. might be stepping in. They took us further back in. We drove through an empty village, and they stuck us in a slightly bigger house. This house we had all to ourselves. There was a total of 4 rooms, but all were smaller. One was used as a shower, and we slept in the others. The big chief showed up with meds. They even had some subscription meds for Matt. They're doing everything they can to make us comfortable. Matt was making some really funny comments to the guards because they were always getting in the way, shining their lights around. He called the one guard Mr. Zigzag and basically told him to go get lost. Of course, they can't understand English. We all busted up laughing. The one guy was trying to light a cigarette in the house. The first match didn't light, so I started praying the next one wouldn't either. That smoke would have just filled the house. Austin just joined in out loud, praising God every time one didn't light. He went through the rest of the matches in his box and none lit. So these meds that they brought Um, Matt has a condition where his immune system overspeeds, so he has to take something to suppress that. And this box of meds that they showed up, it looked like possibly someone, like an American or someone that knew a little bit about meds and painkillers, put this box together. They had one kind of his subscription med in there for Matt. The other kind was not in there. And we later confirmed that Barry had put this box together because we got access to a phone. They gave us a phone to tell us to wipe it so that they could use it for their own use. And we got a couple text messages out to Barry, and one text that he sent back was, "Did you get the meds?" So we knew the meds had come somehow from him, and they had probably made a drop, and the gang had picked them up. So October 28th, Thursday. Ryan was in a good mood this morning and was making his rounds, trying to help Chef Law and just looking for something to do. We called Ryan our home improvement guy. The guards got a farmer to get us some coconuts, and we had coconut water and coconut meat. October 29, Friday, boring day. That's all I have down. October 30, Saturday. Papa Willie Chief showed up with a bunch of snacks. Every time they bring us stuff like this, it feels like they plan to keep us for a while, and although we enjoy the treats, we wish they would just let us go. October 31, Sunday. We had church and tried to get the guards to join in. They wouldn't have it. We had a good discussion about heaven, and heaven sounded like a good place to be. This afternoon, we noticed a plane circling us very high. Brandon was drying off a bright-colored shirt, trying to get its attention. A new guard just showed up. We watched him get his gun training. It was sort of interesting. It ended with him and Chef Law awkwardly rolling around in the weeds. That was the one we named Rookie. November 1, Monday, boring day. November 2, Tuesday. We cleaned the house today from top to bottom using our bathing water to wash walls, mop floors. Ryan forced some windows open thanks to Ryan's home improvement. The plane circled again. Sam found something that we rebuked and threw into the field. Dale saw 3 snakes today. So this thing that Sam found, sort of accidental, he was out on the porch in the morning. I'm not sure what he was doing, just standing there praying, looking at the sunrise. And Froggy walks up the side, goes up to a tree, and looks like he screwed a cap onto a bottle. It was sort of in the weeds there by the tree. And Sam didn't think anything about it. He just happened to see him, and Froggy happened to see Sam looking at him, and he told Sam, "Don't touch this. This is for Satan. If you mess with it, it'll bite you." So Sam was like, "Well, that's interesting." He hadn't thought much about it. He didn't know what it was until they said something. He wouldn't have even thought twice about it. But he was there thinking about it, and he finally went to some of the others that were outside there, and he told them what happened. And then they were trying to decide, well, what should we do with it? Should we just leave it alone, or should we maybe just get rid of it? So they prayed about it, and they finally decided, you know what, we're just going to throw this thing. Not sure what the consequences are going to be, but we don't need this kind of stuff around here. They can understand that while we're here, Satan can't be here. They can take one or the other, but they can't have us both here. So we decided, all right, we're going to throw it. I wasn't there. I was in the house doing something. I'm not sure. So I never saw it. And so they decided to throw it. And then they were trying to figure out who would throw it. Austin plays disc golf. So he said, well, he'll throw it. So they said, okay, sure. And waited till the guards weren't looking, or mostly on the other side of the house. And Austin goes over there, and he described it as a bottle in a bag with like barbed wire wrapped around it inside. he said it would sort of prick you if you just grabbed the whole bag. So he just grabbed the neck of it and gave it a good whirl out into the field. Sam said he saw something red come out, a liquid. He thought it broke, and we didn't hear anything about it until the next night. Obviously, this thing it seemed like it was more security for them than it was anything to do with us. They would screw the lid on during the morning and then unscrew it at night. I don't know, let the spirits out or whatever that thing was. So nothing happened during the day, but we knew the time was going to be coming tonight when they were going to find out that it's gone. And during that day was when Dale saw 3 snakes. We had seen a couple snakes before. I think we killed 1 or 2 of those snakes. But that day, for some reason, they were out. Not sure if it had any connection with anything or not. They were just little green. They were non-poisonous snakes. So that night, Froggy came to unscrew the lid off the bottle, and we were sitting there in a circle outside, and I saw him headed for the tree there, and I was like, okay, here it comes. And he reaches down there, and of course he didn't find anything, and stands back up, and then he yells for some of the guards, and they came over there to see what was up, and they had quite a noisy discussion right there just to begin with, and then all of a sudden they yelled, "Sam!" And Froggy came running over to our group, and he was pretty convinced Sam had something to do with this. And we started praying out loud, and then we spent some time singing as well, but they were pretty agitated. They were yelling and threatening to beat Sam, and the one guy pulled his gun out. He's like, "You know what this is? This is a gun. I mean, I can shoot you." And Sam was just standing there, "Just shoot me then. I don't care." They told him they'd beat him until he told them where it was at. And some of it sort of changed into more of a begging, like trying to get him to tell him where it was at. That's when we sort of thought that maybe this is more for their security than anything else. I'll just read what I have in my diary. November 3, Wednesday. Last night, Froggy found we had thrown the bottle, or whatever that thing was. I never saw it. They were furious, trying to get us to tell them what we did with it and where it was at. We prayed and sang and rebuked Satan for about 3 hours. It was the most dramatic time since our capture. We stood around each other, supported each other. Everyone was praying out loud. Finally, we got into the house. The guards were still trying to get Sam to tell them where it was at. They were all wound up. It seemed like that thing was more for them, and they wanted to find it. In the middle of the fight, Eeyore asked for cookies. We handed the whole box of snacks we had just got from Papa Willie a few days ago out onto the porch. One of the guards threw it back in. The next morning, we had a good laugh at how Eeyore, in the middle of the heat, needed comfort food. And then there was nothing else that happened with that bottle. We did see that they had another bottle later on, but they didn't let us know where it was at. And they would sometimes Brandon, I think one time, saw them take off with it, like they had it beside a tree at night, and the next morning he was just out looking around, and he saw someone grab something beside a tree and take off with it, and so he figured, well, they probably have another bottle out. But by that time, we had made our point, and it was more them protecting that thing than it was us destroying it, and so we figured it wasn't going to have any power. November 4, Thursday. So another thing, fairly early on in the kidnapping, they brought us a big black bag. It was about this tall, just a big black garbage bag full of clothes, and it just had random odds and ends in there. anything from PJs to t-shirts to pants. So we were able to wash and take a shower and wash our other set of clothes. We each had 2 sets of clothes. Except for the ladies, they would usually take a shower in the morning and then stand in the sun and dry their dresses out. But in there was a pair of pink froggy pants. And Brandon was the one that usually wore them every now and then in a pinch if we were sharing some pants or something around us. For us guys, every now and then I would have them. November 4 starts out in my diary. I'm sitting here in pink froggy pants. We're laughing at Chef Locke as he's trying to install the door upside down. The one hinge is on backwards, so if it opens, it'll pull his nails out. He's super flustered and we don't really care. My feet hurt. So this was the first entry that I put in, my feet hurt. Right over that time, we'd been barefoot in Crocs pretty much the whole time, but right over that time I had a little athlete's foot. And just all the ant bites, mosquito bites, the dust, rubbed everything raw on my feet. And they were breaking out in sores. It got to the place where I couldn't walk. They would carry me around. I would sit on a chair, and then they would just pick up the whole chair, 2 guys, and then move me over to where the group was at or move me back into the house. And that's how I spent a couple days. I could hardly walk. November 5, Friday. Froggy said he was in a meeting with the big chiefs. Again, I wrote down my feet hurt. Yesterday, Cheryl wrapped them up with some Band-Aids. Those would have come out of her diaper bag. November 6, Saturday. We had accountability meeting this morning. This was something that we did back at CAM the first Saturday of every month. We had accountability meeting. It was a good time. I got to really enjoy that time. And we decided we're just going to have it right here. It was the first Saturday of November. So the ladies went to one. I think they were in the house, and us guys were outside. And we had a good time. It went well. We were able to make a fire and boil some water. I soaked my feet in hot water and ashes from the wood, and Cheryl bandaged them up. Last night, fairly late, we opened one of the doors to go to the bathroom. There were no guards around except for one out in the field. It must have scared him to see us coming out of the house. They had just shut us in. That guy shot in the air, and the others came running out, and before long we were back in the house again. November 7, another Sunday. I soaked my feet this morning. I can hardly walk. We had a little service. Big Chief came in the morning. We talked with Chef Law for quite some time. Later, the Big Chief talked with Chef Law for quite some time. Later, Chef Law said, 4 more days, then we can go home. We have no idea what's actually going on. Haiti doesn't have anything that happens quickly or on time, but we're hoping he's right. And when he said 4 more days we can go home, he was excited. He was ready to see us leave. I think he was pretty tired of us. And he definitely wanted us to go home. A lot of our day guards were wanting us to go home. November 8, Monday, ordinary day. My feet are feeling better right now. We had an interesting discussion with Chef Law. He believes in flying goats, turkeys, and other animals at night. Amongst ourselves, we discussed everything from school, food, vehicles. We also discussed a kidnappers reunion once we were released. November 9, Tuesday. It rained last night. Ryan and Melody woke up with their mattress in a puddle because the roof over that room leaked. Sam preached to one of the gangsters that came with Froggy, and he told Sam he's looking forward to tell God to send him to hell. Zigzag brought us mangoes. I'm not sure if he was planning to give them to us or not, but Andre gave him a hearty thank you, and he promptly handed them out. Brandon quickly climbed a coconut tree while no guards were looking and started raining down coconuts. Charlie Horse spotted him and started raising a loud commotion, telling him he's going to fall and break his leg. Brandon got quite a few knocked down, though, and we got coconut water. He looked sort of funny up in the tree in those pink froggy pants. November 10, Wednesday. This morning, Ryan heard one of the guards' radios talk English. They quickly turned the volume down and went around the corner. We're fasting today, and Froggy brought us eggs, avocados, and bread, the best food he ever brings. But we held on and fasted anyway. This afternoon, a big jetliner did a tight circle over top of us. Carrot Top loaded his shotgun, and they started calling a couple people. A little later, in a field not far from us, there was a bunch of shooting. Sheflaw fired up in the air with his pistol, and they hurried us all into the house. We later found out that gangsters were stealing goats over there. November 12, Friday. My feet are healing nicely. Someone helped me get into the loft over the porch, and I explored around a little and found what I thought was a paint stirrer. It was actually a branding iron. I thought it could come in handy as a pry bar should we ever need one for some home improvement. November 13, Saturday. We are out of water to drink. Seems like it might be a little difficult for them to get drinking water, where Froggy just wants something to harass us with. Carrot Top asked 3-year-old Andre how to say cabrit in English, which is, cabrit is goat. I don't know where he got it, but Andre said it's an H, and little Andre had Carrot Top calling goats H. Austin and I fixed something up in the back of the house so we could look outside a little if we wanted to during the night. November 14, Sunday. We had church this morning, but with food, liberty, and stories as our topics. Stories of people being delivered and how God can deliver us. We gave God a lot of good ideas. And one topic that we discussed a lot was faith. And where does faith in our wants and wishes come into play? Did God really want us here at Gangster Camp? We were definitely making an impact on the gang here and really had them thinking, what are they going to do after they die? And we tried to really put the pressure on. And some were under conviction pretty heavily, and just had them thinking about the afterlife. It was something that they didn't really think much about. But where did God want us? We all wanted to be out. And did we have enough faith that God could deliver us? As well as, what is faith? Do we believe that God will deliver us to the point where we make the first move? We're the ones stepping out. We believe that God is going to deliver us to the point where we're going to just walk out underneath these people's noses? Or how does this plan out? Should we figure this thing out, like try to dig a tunnel or have a really strategic plan in place, or will God just take us out of here? And that was a subject that we didn't know really how to address. We liked discussing it, and we did a lot of that, discussing faith. Faith without works is dead. So do we just believe God can take us out of here, and then we just sit back and say, we're waiting on you, God, where are you at? Or are we supposed to make the first move? Later that day, there was a plane circling again during prayer time. So we walked in a figure 8 to try to catch its attention. Yesterday, Froggy asked Sam if we have a GPS in us. When he saw the scar on Sam's arm, he was pretty sure he found it. That time, Sam told him that there's no GPS here, but later times he would play along and tell him that they could never hide us. Someone would always see where we were at. So Sam had broken his arm back when he was young, and his bones were sticking out of his skin, basically. His arm was broke here in the middle, and it was like an L shape. So he had a big scar. He actually had 2 metal plates in his arm there, and a big long scar here. And evidently they figured out that the planes and stuff circling us were for us, and that people knew where we were at, and so they were sure we had a GPS. They also asked if we had cameras, Brandon just aimed his watch at one of them and went. Of course, we told him not to do that. We were not wanting them to take our watches away. But yeah, some of that we sort of played along, and it was sort of funny how they would get worked up about it. November 15, Monday. All the guards were asleep this morning, so we prayed that if they were still sleeping in 15 minutes, we would just run right in the middle of the morning. That gave us enough time to get water packed and our shoes on. Some of us were in our civilian clothes either. So we all packed, and we're standing outside, and right on 15 minutes, to the dot. It wasn't a second too late or too early. We saw 2 more guards coming across the field, so that canceled that. That night, I woke up with loud music outside. It must have been going on for quite a while. This was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd been sleeping pretty good, but I woke up with music outside. I didn't think it was necessary, so I told Chef La, who was sleeping on the couch right outside the door, to go turn it down or turn it off. And he actually did. And then I heard people praying in the other room. So I went over there just to see what was going on and joined them. Apparently the music, unknown to me, was an attempt to put a curse on us. They figured that out because of some of the English words that were in the music. Sam Stoltzfus was mentioned in the song. Cam, missionaries. There was a couple other English words that were in there. So they have figured that this was some for music to try to put a curse on us. So they were in the other room praying. I had not known that before I told them to just go turn it off. I was trying to get some sleep. Froggy was here with the truck, and they were playing it across the truck stereo. November 17, Wednesday. We fed Charlie Horse a story about the U.S. coming in to get us and how he would be running away. Matt did a good live show of him trying to smoke his cigarette and run, and after describing a bomb with his hands and loud noises, he picked up a little piece of coconut and said, "Look at little Charlie Horse." Austin was laughing so hard that he fell off the cooler. I think we sort of scared the poor guy. He didn't think it was too funny. This evening, the mood was up. We spent time sharing jokes and just trying to make everything funny. We laughed and laughed together. It was good medicine. Speaking of which, Brandon gave the little dog that runs around here some Benadryl just to see what would happen. We also decided to start a 24-hour prayer chain. And we did this with one of the watches. One of the watches was just for this, and we would pass it off every half an hour to the next guy. We had an order that we went. Day or night, didn't matter, half an hour. You woke the other guy up or just went and found him around the house there and just handed it off. And then he would have the watch for half an hour. November 20, Saturday. They moved us back to the first location. This would be back to this spot. They moved us back to the first location last night. A plane was circling during that time, and they shot at it. It moved to higher ground but kept circling. The next afternoon, Matt got sick, and he was sent home, but none of us know for sure. So that afternoon, Matt went from walking around to being flat on the bed in 20, 30 minutes. He felt something coming on, and he mentioned something. He had had this before, and he had been hospitalized. So we got pretty scared, and then he was on the bed shaking, running a fever, and then he'd be chill or be really cold. And his heart was hurting, so we weren't sure what to do. We were really putting pressure on the guards. You got to get this guy out of here. Chef Law started calling some people. He called the big chief, told a little bit what was going on. And a couple hours later, they actually showed up. And then an hour or so later, another vehicle showed up, one that we hadn't seen before. it seemed to be maybe a third party. That was the vehicle that we put Matt into. By this time, Matt said he was starting to feel better, but we told him, you're going to act as sick as you can. We're going to get you out of here. He wanted to walk to the truck. We told him, no, we're going to carry you out there, and you're going to act sick. You might be getting better, but that's the last thing we're going to tell these guys. We're going to get you out of here. We didn't know where they were going to take them, but the scenario there seemed pretty good. A different truck showed up. It looked like a nice truck. And we loaded them up. Rachel was able to go along. They had offered Matt to leave because of his condition, but they weren't going to let Rachel go along, so Matt wasn't going to have anything to do with that. He was going to stay there. And he said that time, too, that he wasn't going to leave unless Rachel would go with him. So they let Rachel go along, and that was when 2 of us left. 2 out of our group. November 21, Sunday. This morning, which had been about 4 o'clock, and that would have been the same night that Matt would have left. The big chief brought in 2 guys. They were Haitians from another gang. They were beating them, and they looked in pretty bad shape, muddy and bloody. Some of the ladies are fighting sores, and Papa Willie brought us cream and soap to see if that would help. So a couple of ladies here were breaking out with big sores open, and there wasn't a whole lot we could do about it. And so Papa Willie brought some, it was skin lightening cream. It didn't really do a whole lot of good. We wanted like triple antibiotic stuff, but they didn't seem to know what that was. He also brought us some bar soap, so that was handy when we were taking showers. The 2 Haitians that they brought to us that night, they were from another gang. Chef Law told Sam that they fight with this gang every now and then, so they seem to recognize, or at least recognize the other group. So November 22, Monday, we heard the radio talking about us. It was mentioned that 2 of us were released. Hopefully Matts are doing well and are in good hands. This would have been the first time when we would have for sure heard that Matts might be doing well or are in good hands when it was mentioned over the radio that 2 of us were released. November 23, Tuesday. It rained a lot during the night, and we woke up to mud. There was water standing around everywhere, so some of us guys dug some little canals with sticks to try to drain the water off the road and take it out there to that irrigation ditch. We were discussing names for our excavation company. Sam wanted to call it Boombagai Excavation, which translated means good thing excavation. I wanted a good southern name, so I named it Bless Your Heart Excavation. Sam and I were stalking Rookie, trying to act like we were praying, but really trying to hear his radio. He had it on a news station. He kept eluding us. I would casually walk around one house to get as close as I can, and Sam would do the same thing on the other side. Finally, after sort of chasing Rookie to one corner of the yard, I overheard something about no tourism in Haiti because of kidnappings. That was about all we got out of that. Kay and Dale talked with Froggy and asked him if he's ready to die. He ignored the question and said we won't leave here till after a year. November 28th, Sunday. Yesterday, a really big 4-prop plane circled us for a couple hours. And then this was where my journal practically stopped. Our pen ran out of ink. And there was a couple of us keeping journals with one pen, and it ran out of ink. My next entry is December 14. So I went from November 28, just a little bit after Thanksgiving, to December 14. I've written down, our pen ran out of ink, so we couldn't write. This is Eeyore's pen. Cheryl, Kay, and Sheldon left Sunday a week ago. It was a pretty dramatic night that night. they weren't about to let Sheldon go. They were just going to let Cheryl and Kay go. They were the ones with the most sores. If we were going to try to do an escape attempt, it would have been impossible. Cheryl could have hardly walked. Sheldon was in pretty good health. He was a 6-year-old, but he wouldn't leave his mom, and he made a big enough fuss that they finally got clearance from further up to let him go along with his mom. His mom wasn't about to leave without him either. It was pretty dramatic that night. The big 4-prop plane flies over us every other day. The guards cleaned our house 2 different times with Clorox to try to control the ant population. We made signs for the planes, and they let us know that they saw them. Last night it rained. It would have been a perfect night to leave the house unnoticed. All the guards were on the porch. But we're not together on the subject of running. Peter, one of the 2 guys they brought and beat, seems to have given his life to the Lord. He's got a smile on his face. Sam keeps preaching to Ping, and yesterday Ping got really mad. None of the guards like Sam. Andre was sick the last couple of nights and all day yesterday. The guards must have gotten paid with drugs and cocaine. The last couple of days they are drugged and loopy. Hopefully this mud dries up soon. So on the signs that we made to the big plane, there was a couple cardboard boxes laying around, and we found a couple pieces of charcoal, and we wrote SOS, we need help, on 2 different sides. And then we actually waved them right over here in this area. We had a guy standing here on the porch and another one here, and they were just casually standing there. The guards were here by this car axle. This is also where Peter and the other Haitian guy were tied up, and the rest of us were in here. This guy and this guy would yell heads or tails if we needed to quickly fold up the signs and act like we're doing something else in case the guards happened to walk around here. We used that system as well. There was a couple of times when I went into the brush here. This was all pretty brushy. The outhouse was just a couple upright sticks with tarp around it and a little bit of thatch over the roof. The end facing the brush was completely open, and there was a little bit of a hole right here that you could sort of dive headfirst into the brush. So I would walk out here, get into the outhouse, take a peek around, make sure there was no guards watching, and then quickly dive headfirst into the brush here, and then I would explore around some, trying to see if I could get a trail out here to this irrigation ditch. There was a well-beaten trail there. A lot of Haitians would walk past their farmers. And so if we could get there unnoticed, I figured we could be well out, especially at night. There was a time during the night where they would sort of quit opening the door and checking up on us. And if we could leave shortly after that time, we had the guards patterned pretty good with our watches. If we could leave shortly after that time and make it all the way out to the irrigation ditch without anyone noticing us, we figured we could have all night to run. But we weren't together on the idea of running. However, by this time, 5 of us had been released, and the group was getting smaller. So I had been doing some exploring in the brush, and I hadn't got to that irrigation ditch yet. And I knew if they're going to be releasing more people, it's going to be pretty obvious if I am not in the group, if the group is pretty small. So even though we weren't together on the idea of running, we needed options if it got down to 4 or 5 guys and it was a good opportunity to run. We needed options in order to be able to do that. We weren't necessarily planning on running anytime soon, especially with the children and the ladies. But I figured we got to have options, so I was getting pretty desperate to get a trail over there to that irrigation ditch. So this is where my journal ends. The next day, it was drying up from rain. There was a power strip right outside this door that the guards used to charge their phones at night. The generator was over there by the outhouse, and they ran wires over to the house, and they wired in a power strip right there by that door. And they would sit outside that door at night on a chair and charge phones. So going out that door wasn't really a good option if there was someone sitting right there. And because of the rain that came the night before, that whole area was flooded and muddy, and the guards were on the porch all night, and they didn't have access to that power strip to charge their phones. So the next day, they took it completely down and moved it on the other side of the house onto the porch. So we were watching that, and I don't know who I nudged, but I told someone, look at that. I mean, there goes their reason for sitting outside this door. Is this a sign we need to be thinking about leaving? It was definitely a intimidating thought of escape. They had told us that if some of us escaped, they would shoot the rest of us that stayed back. They said if we escaped and got all the way out, they would be shot. That was one reason why we were a little bit, had differing ideas on whether escape was what we should be doing or not. We weren't sure if other people dying should be the case if we escape. Did God want that to happen? We discussed also the story of Peter when the angel came and got Peter out. I think there were 16 guards that lost their life. So it could be argued from about every angle. And basically we were just praying that God would give us enough faith to make the attempt if he wanted us to make the attempt. Because it was a scary thought. The mood was lifting, but we all felt exhausted and lazy. It's interesting, when you don't have anything to do, it's hard to get motivated and you don't feel like doing anything. Even though we weren't united on the idea of escape, there was one thing that was needed, and that was a route through the brush. I woke up that last morning and decided to make my best attempt at getting to the beaten path through the brush. I crawled in, and after a few hours was able to stomp a path to the beaten trail. And this is what... So I went in here at the outhouse just because that was a good place to get in unnoticed. Right here, this light patch was sort of a low spot in the brush. We could walk in right here. I didn't do that just because it would be more noticeable if one of the guards happened to be just walking past the house. So I would usually go in right here. We used our heads and tails systems with a couple people standing here and there to tell me when I could jump across this low patch. And then back in here, we were out of sight. The brush over here was pretty tall, and you could hide behind it. You couldn't see through that. So if we could get here on this is what I stomped down. It took me a couple hours to get out here to this irrigation ditch because I was trying to do it as quietly as I could. But this is what I got stomped down. And that was the direction that we took then. We walked through this little low spot and came out here to this mango tree. That morning when I got all the way out there to that irrigation ditch, I just stopped and looked at Goat Mountain for a while. It was one mountain that we recognized off in the distance. Route 3 was on there. I could see some vehicles driving around on it a long ways off. But for some reason that morning it looked really close. We had estimates anywhere from 3 miles to 8 miles as far as how far this was going to be. The land is flat all the way out to this mountain range, so it was really hard to judge any kind of distance. It looked really close. I got excited like I was never excited before. We did our little heads, tails systems again, and I crawled back out. And we had a trail with an entrance we could just walk the whole way. I came out with a grin on my face. I couldn't keep it off. I was pretty pumped that morning. I got all the way out there. Ryan asked me, "What you got on your face?" I said, "That mountain isn't that far. I've got a trail all the way to the mango tree. If we can get to that trail in the brush without the guards seeing us cross the yard during the night, we could have all night to run." And Ryan promptly gets up and he walks to another side of the house and just starts pacing around. I hadn't known it, but Ryan had prayed that morning. He was getting pretty desperate. His whole family was there. Andre was getting sicker. One of his glands on his neck was starting to swell. He was running a fever. The day before, he basically just whimpered around all day long. His wife was there with him. They had a 10-month-old baby by that time, and he was getting pretty desperate. He needs to get out of here, take his family out. And he prayed that if I came out of the brush all discouraged, the thorns are too thick, the mountain's too far away, there's just no way we can do it, then we would drop the idea of running. But if I came out and was pretty confident that we could maybe do it and was excited about it, then we would go. We would take that as a sign to go. Unknowing to him, his wife prayed the same thing. So I came out of there just all excited, let's do this. And I didn't know it until 1 o'clock, our prayer time. Ryan told us about it. We gathered together in a circle, and he said, we weren't quite all there, and someone said, Ryan was at the end, someone just told him, well, why don't you start, and by the time we get around, the others will be here, and we all took turns praying, and Ryan said, no, I have something I need to share. Let's just wait till everyone gets here. So 5-10 minutes later, everyone was there, and Ryan just shared what happened that morning, and he also shared his testimony. He was thinking of one of his cousins. His mom had some mentally handicapped sisters, and his grandparents had raised them. I think there was 4 of them, so they had their hands full. They finally decided after they were older to put them in a home. They didn't like the idea of putting them in a home, but it was just too much for them. They were getting older, so they finally decided to put them in a home. And after some time, they noticed that one of the ladies had a tumor growing in her stomach, and they did some tests and found that she was pregnant, and it must have been one of the male staff there at the home. The home was pretty distressed about it, and they wanted to quickly, cover it up or whatever. So they printed off the papers, gave it to the grandparents, said, all you have to do is sign right here, we'll take care of the rest. The baby's not going to be normal at all. And they really put the pressure on to do an abortion. But the grandparents decided that's not the way they're going to do it. One of the uncles said they would adopt the baby. They had no idea if it was going to be normal or not. The baby came, it was a boy, it was perfectly normal. He is married today and has a family, and Ryan thinks a lot of his cousin. So Ryan shared that. A lot of the time that he was sharing that, he was crying. It was a really moving time. And then we went around the circle, and we had done this before. He said that God is asking me to take my family out of here. That story had just come to him that morning, and he said that it seemed like God was making the comparison that his grandparents had to make as being the same step that he needs to make now with his family and just step out and leave. He said we don't have to have the perfect night. The conditions don't have to be right. The moon might be full. The generator might not be running to make cover noise. But we just need to look for an opportunity, pray about it. hand it over to God and just go. He said that's what he believes God is asking him to do. He said, I know we don't all agree on this subject, but I need to go. If you guys want to stay here, yeah, they said they'd shoot you, but I don't believe that's going to happen. You're worth more to them alive than dead. You're welcome to come along with me if you want, but I need to get my family out of here. And then he said, I would like everyone to just share their thoughts. And we went around the circle, and that was the first time we were all okay with the idea of running. And this would have been about 12 hours before we'd have been on the trail. So God really uses unity, and sometimes maybe he just waits till we're all unified before he actually works. So that was the first time we were all united. That afternoon, we made preparations. It was a really good afternoon. I mean, we were all in this. The ladies went in the house. We had one diaper bag, and we didn't want weight, but we wanted our essentials, water, whatever else we needed. So they packed the diaper bag. Us guys were outside. Austin and I and Dale, and we were trying to figure out how can we fix this thing up to increase our odds of getting across this yard. So we had to open the door was one problem. The other problem was getting across the yard unseen with 8 guards at night. And we figured the only time we could go was if the guards were all on the other side of the house. They had just moved their power strip over there, so they really had no reason to be on this side of the house. The door's propped. It's barred. They don't really check it. If we can unbar the door and get across the yard, we'll probably be okay. If they're going to catch us, it's going to be right here in the yard, and probably all they'll do is just really yell at us, chase us back in the house, and then really guard us. We might only have one chance at this. So we need to just do what we can to make it right, or increase our odds. That door with the post and the rock in front of it had right down the middle, there was about a 2-inch crack in between the boards. And so we figured we can get a stick out of that crack and push up on the post. And then maybe if we help that out a little bit by leaning the post at a specific spot, we moved it that evening and put it at a fairly steep angle to where it would move easier than being directly against the door. And then we also moved it as close to the door entrance where someone could maybe get their arm around and grab it on the outside fairly quickly so that it wouldn't fall down. It was a pretty heavy post. It would make quite a bit of a thump. That crack went all the way down to the bottom, so we could use the same stick to push that big heavy rock out of the way. So getting out of the door, we were pretty sure we had that. We had a pretty good system there. The only problem was crossing the yard and stomping through those brush, or through the bushes there. It was going to be a little noisy. The generator had been out of oil for the last couple of days. It had an oil sensor on it, so it wasn't going to run until they put oil in it. They said they couldn't get oil, so we weren't sure if that was going to happen. We moved those water drums, Austin and I. Austin stuck his head in there and was pretending to scoop water, and then I was on the outside, and we'd roll the thing to make it look as, we'd tip it over. And they were pretty full of water, so Austin had to stay back pretty far. But he would pretend to be reaching down, and then I would push on it. And we got those things walked over to where it would somewhat block the guard's vision if they happened to be out here. It would sort of block their vision from the corner of the house to the entrance over here. So we rolled him over here to try to help that out as best we could. This side of the house on this back side had a shower. It was basically set up same as the outhouse, just a couple upright posts with a tarp around it. The entrance was on this side, so you would walk the back side of the house into it. And it was decided that I would go first and just do a quick scout once I got through the door. And then I decided I would just run into the shower. I could push the tarp out of the way just a little bit, and then I would be able to see this whole side of the house. And then also I decided to run over here to the outhouse and then walk across this entrance and see where the guard's line of sight was going to meet up with the entrance there. So those were some of the preparations we made. We broke a stick that we thought was sturdy enough and small enough to fit through the door crack and be able to push those barriers out of the way. And then the only other thing that we really wanted, and that was a generator. So when Froggy came with supper that evening, I'd asked him that morning for oil, and I thought, well, I'll just go ask him again, see if he's got oil. And I went to walk up to him, and for some reason I just got the feeling that this is all taken care of. I don't need to ask him for oil. So I said, okay, fine, and just committed it to the Lord and just prayed about it and turned around and walked back to the group. And someone said, did you ask Froggy for oil? And I said, yeah, I was walking up to ask him, but I decided that I'm just going to commit it to the Lord. Just felt at peace about it. This is the Lord's night tonight. We don't need the generator to be running. He can work without that thing. If it's not running, we'll run anyway. And they were like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's really make God work here, you know. So we decided at 1 o'clock, which would have been Eastern time, daylight savings time, we would start our surveillance. We had a couple places that we fixed up inside the house to where we could look out from inside. They were sort of limited as far as view, but we could do a little bit of surveillance. And we decided to do that at 1 o'clock, which is usually when the guards quit opening the door and asking for water. And we decided that if it got to 3 o'clock, we wouldn't run. We didn't figure we had enough time to get all the way to Goat Mountain and get all the way out before they would notice that we'd be gone. So we went to bed. Ryan was standing there with a styrofoam plate fanning Andre. There were no fans going. Generator wasn't running. And Froggy shows up. And Froggy never shows up during the night. He walks up. Usually he drives, but he just randomly shows up. And he asked Ryan, why aren't the fans running? And Ryan said, the generator isn't running. It's out of oil. It needs oil. And he made some statement, and then he pulled his phone out and makes a phone call. And about half an hour later, a motorbike shows up and dumps oil in the generator, and the thing fires up. And we were like, all right, this is just great. We've got a generator tonight. That should make some cover noise when we move stuff, unbar the door, and walk out. So we went to bed. The fans were running inside, so we were able to whisper and make plans. We still had a lot of plans to make. We figured up a line, figured out who would be first, next, all the way back to the end of the line. We had both rooms inside that house. The second time we moved back, we had that house all to ourselves. So we had our line of order, and once we got the door unbarred, and I would be outside quickly doing a quick scan where the guards were at, the others would be in line, ready to go as soon as I came back to the door. So 1 o'clock rolls around, I fell asleep, someone wakes me up and said, we got to start surveillance. So we had about a 2-hour window when the guards would be the most at ease to try to make an attempt at the door. The guards were not at ease that night at all. They moving around, jamming out on the radio, smoking. Yeah, they were just uneasy. And we weren't ever, I was thinking these guys aren't ever going to settle down. Finally, they settled down a little bit, and we were like, okay, well, we'll start with the rock. So I grabbed the stick, and I went over there to the door, and I pushed the rock out of the way. We had turned it the evening before to where it would roll the easiest. Turned it out of the way, or just pushed it out of the way. It rolled back 2.5, 3 feet or so with a little bit of a thunk. Didn't really seem to make a whole lot of noise. There was one board that had been covering that 2-inch strip, and we had turned that thing, or pried that thing loose. It was hung on by one nail, and we sort of left it there so that they wouldn't really see that we had been working at that door to get that crack as wide as we could. And it was hung on by one nail. We kept it that way, but Brandon just grabbed it and yanked it completely off. It was sort of in the way there, and it came out with a loud squeak. And Ping came running around the end of the house, and then he just stood there and looked at the door for probably a good minute. And the rock was obviously pushed out of the way, and it was full moonlight. You could read your newspaper outside. It was bright. We had moved mattresses around inside the house, and we had our line already made. Ryan had got Andre on his shoulder, had woke him up so that he wouldn't be crying. Melody had Laura all wrapped up. We were ready to run with water in our pockets, little water bags in our pockets. And then Ping's right outside the door there looking at the rock we just pushed out of the way. And we just quickly spread the mattresses out, hit the beds, kicked our shoes off. We were sure he was going to come in the house and figure out what we had been up to. But he stood there and looked at that door for about a minute and then just walked off. Walked right back to where the other guards were and sat down. Or I didn't see him. I don't know what he did, but he didn't open the door. We stayed there for a little while. We were sure he's going to eventually open the front door, but he never did. It was about 2:40, 2:45. Someone shook me a little bit and said, "You want to do it again, or try again?" It's pretty close to our dead end time, and I said, "Yeah, sure." I tapped Ryan, and he had already put Andre back on the bed. Andre was sleeping again, and so he's going to have to wake him up again. And I asked him, "Did you want to try it again? It's going to be one more try." We had 10, 15 minutes left. And he said, "Yeah, sure, let's go." So he jumps up, picks up Andre, and Brandon and I went back to the door. And now all we had was the post. So being as I was going to be the one going out first, I was standing at the crack. Brandon was down on his knees, putting the stick up through the crack, and he was shoving upward on the post, and we got the door open about 2-3 inches. And I was able to get my hand out, and then finally I got a hold of the post, but it was too heavy. I couldn't lift it. So he gave it another good shove, and I was really shoving pretty hard on the door to keep as much tension on the post. I didn't want it to fall over, and I was able to squeeze out. And I just grabbed the whole post and set it off the door, leaned it up against the wall, just back of the door. Quickly ran around the house, jumped in the shower, and pried the tarp open just a little bit, and all the guards were still sitting there, but there was 3 of them right up here by these chairs, and it looked like it was going to be close to their line of sight at the entrance. So I just quickly trotted over here to the outhouse, stepped across that entrance, and was just looking to see where their line of sight was going to meet, and I didn't see it. It looked like it was going to be close, but this might just work. So I quickly went back to the door. This didn't take more than a couple seconds, 20 seconds or so. I went back to the door and said, it's good, let's go. And just like that, Melody was stepping out of the door. The door came open. Melody was right behind me, and Ryan was right behind her. We wanted the babies to get out. I was going to take Ryan and Melody and the children through the brush and just keep going. The others could rebar the door and follow us. But we wanted the children, as quickly as possible, to have a good distance, be a good distance away in case they started crying. but it wasn't long at all. Like we were in the brush, and everyone else was filing out the door. I don't know if it was 30 seconds, and we were all in the brush. Sam and Dale were the last two guys. Sam closed the door, picked up the rock, put it right up against it, and at the same time, Dale leaned the post against the door, and they never missed a beat. They were right behind the next guy. The other guy asked him, "Did you for sure rebar the door?" They had caught up so quickly, he wasn't sure if they had forgotten the door or not. They said, "Yeah, we rebarred it." And then we were all in the brush. I looked at my watch. It was 2:50, 10 minutes before our deadline. We got out there to that irrigation ditch by that mango tree, quickly cut a left, and walked out. And then we spent a little bit of time crossing the irrigation ditch. It was fairly wide, I don't know, 3 feet wide or something, sort of muddy down at the bottom, a little slippery, a little difficult to jump across with the children and the ladies, but we finally got across. We didn't walk down the trail very far at all, and we saw a bridge, and we had just spent 3-4 minutes trying to jump across this thing when we could have just walked down the road a little bit, and there was a bridge. Right about that time, we made a right, headed north. The moon was pretty much full moon. It was bright, and the trails were really good. Well, we walked through fields, farm fields, northwest, and it was sort of the direction we wanted to go, and we came to a house. And so we sort of stopped a little bit. It was off to our right, just a little piece. And we walked past it, but it was full moonlight. Everyone could see us out here. And we walked past it a little bit, and we saw another house. And this one, we were going to walk just feet of it. The brush, there's some thorn bushes off to the side. The trail walked right past this house. And we weren't sure if we wanted to do that. We prayed about it, and we decided, yeah, we're just going to do it. We asked God to keep all the dogs quiet and to blind any eyes, and we just kept on going. Walked right past it, made a little bit of a right-hand turn, and there was a whole village of houses. And we weren't sure what to do now. We sort of wanted to sneak along the one row of houses just to try to get in the shadows and just quickly walk through, and there was a donkey right there. So we decided, well, we don't need that thing running around out here. Ryan said, we don't need to be acting this guilty. We're just a group of people going to market. We're getting an early start. Yeah, that might be strange, but we need to not be slinking around. We need to just keep going. We said a word of prayer and walked right through Main Street, houses on both sides. There was a rooster or so that crowed. Other than that, there was no life, no activity. We walked right through that village. Came out the other side. Trails were still good. The countryside was getting a little bit more brushy, but we had good walking, good trails. And we made time. We were not lingering around. We made some really good headways. Got to a lake or a body of water. We weren't sure if it was a river or not, but it went east and west. So if we went west and if we just kept going west, we would just come out on 3 a little quicker than what we were hoping to. And I had been on Route 3 before and never remembered crossing a river, so I figured we can head north fairly shortly. I didn't figure this was a river, it was just a lake. It ended up being just a lake, and we went across it, or just went around it. And once we started heading north again, we got into the briar patch. It was thick. Every stick had a thorn on it. There were cactuses way taller than we were. It was hard to see stars to navigate. The Big Dipper was right on top of us, so we could use the pointer stars on the Big Dipper to point north. And we finally stopped through. We probably spent close to 2 hours in the brush. It started getting daylight when we were in that thorn patch. Up ahead of us, we heard a dump truck going across the road. And so we knew we were coming out onto a road, so we just kept going in that direction. We weren't sure what a road or civilization meant, but it sure sounded like a better idea than this thorn thicket. So we headed up there, and we finally break out onto this road. By this time, it's it's daylight enough to see. And we're surrounded by walls. There was a abandoned compound there with the walls broke down, trees and bushes growing up inside. We heard a baby crying off to the right just a little ways, not too far. There were some cows that had just been released. They were running down the road. There was no one chasing them, but they were obviously just had been released because they were pretty frisky. We got on that road and we decided, well, if we're going to be seen, we're going to be seen making headway. So we started walking, and we were going too fast. I thought about it a little bit. We're going too fast. We need to slow down. But it sure felt better than picking your way through thorns. Melody falls. Took a pretty hard fall. It sounded really bad. She was carrying Laura. Laura starts screaming at the top of her lungs, and we were thinking this isn't good. The fall sounded like there could have been broken legs involved, or broken bones, or at least a twisted ankle. And we were thinking that this is going to be really bad. But she gets up, and she was okay. Laura was still screaming. Dale had run ahead, and he had seen a trail cutting off to the right. He said, he came back and he said, there's a trail that cuts off right off the right off this road. And we were like, let's get off this road. So we quickly trotted down there, cut a right, and we were down that trail not very far, and two vehicles passed on the road right where we just left. No idea who they were. And then we were in open country, sort of. There was tall grass with some thorn bushes dotted out here and there, but it was basically just countryside, coming up really close to the foothills we were on the foothills of Goat Mountain. We could see the road. We could see individual vehicles, dump trucks, box trucks running on Route 3. And so we walked another mile and a half on that plain. It was really rolling. We'd go down, then up and down. Really beautiful country. And we get pretty close to Route 3, and we decided that the whole group would stay back, and Sam and I, being we know the most Creole, would take the little bit of Haitian money that we had that slipped in our diaper bag that the guards hadn't found when they went through it first. Take a little bit of the Haitian money that we had, go out to the road, see if we can tip someone off to use his phone. And so the others stayed back. Sam and I walked out toward the road, and we were walking down the trail, and all of a sudden we saw a guy pop up over the hill on the same trail walking toward us. He was pretty close, so we knew that he saw us right away. He could see that we were white. So I said, well, let's just go talk to him. He already sees us. There's no point in running. So we walked up to him, and I instantly, my heart went to my toes. He had a black plastic ring on each arm. The gang that we were held captive at, all the guards, or everyone part of that gang, had these black plastic rings on their arms. And it seemed like the higher up you were in the gang, the more of these rings you had. The big chief had maybe 8 inches of them, just covering his arm. Froggy said it was something to do with his security, so that he would, not have a wreck on the road or whatever, some superstition. And this guy had one on each arm, so I was thinking, oh, this is not good. This is probably a scout. They dropped him off on 3, and he's coming this direction, and they've probably got a couple of these guys out here just trying to comb the field, see if they can find us. But we didn't make anything of it. Tried to act calm, and Sam just asked him, we're in a little bit of a trouble here. Would you happen to have a phone? And he pats his pockets, and I was looking at him pretty hard, and they were really flat. So I was like, okay, it didn't look like he had a phone in there. He said he didn't have a phone. So I was thinking, okay, great, at least he can't make a phone call right away saying that he found us. But then he said there's a phone up on top of out close to the road. You can find a phone there. Those people will let you use one. So Sam asked him, well, could you show us? We have a little money. We could give you a little tip. And he was like, oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Spins around, and we follow him up to the top of the hill, and then he pointed the house out, the one with the red door. And so we thanked him. Sam gave him a little bit of money. and we walked off. He walked off, and we walked up to the house. There were two guys there playing trumpets, practicing for some church event, and they were pretty surprised to see two white people just show up on the backside of their house and walk around. And so we talked with them a little bit, and then we asked them if they had a phone. They said they did, but it didn't have minutes on it. So we asked them, well, what would it take to get minutes on it? We have a little money, we could pay you. And they said, well, it's a little ways down the road, but we can run down there and get some. So we gave him some money. We told him we'll make a couple phone calls, and whatever's left you can keep. And he was pretty excited about that, so he took off on his bike, came back 10, 15 minutes later, and we had all memorized Barry's phone number. When the big chief had us talk with Barry, Barry's phone number was right there on the main screen. One of the ladies wrote it down. And then we all memorized it in case we got split apart. We would at least have a phone number. We could get a hold of someone if we got access to a phone. So I punched in Barry's phone number, hit send, and it rang for a while. And then finally someone on the other end said hello. And I said, hey, Barry, this is Wes. And it was pretty bad service. It was breaking up a little bit. And he's like, hello? And I said, hey, Barry, this is Wes. And by that time, I was about too emotional. I was like, this is really going to work out. We got a hold of Barry. I could hardly talk. Sam just blurts out, hey, Barry, this is Wes and Sam. The Lord delivered us. And he starts spitting and sputtering on the other end. And he's like, where are you guys at? It's just you guys. Where's the rest of you? Where can I pick you up? And we said, yeah, we're all here. We all escaped, all of us. We're all here. We're on Route 3, just a little north of the police station. He said, I'm coming right now. I'm getting in the truck right now. Phil will be in 99. We're going to come pick you up. Don't leave this phone. So he said, okay, sure. Then Sam went out to the road to see if he could meet up with Barry, and I went back for the group. I went back, got the group, told them that Barry and Phil are on the way, and we came walking out of there. The family that had been there at the house that we made the phone call, they came out onto the trail. By this time, they had put two and two together. They figured out who we were, and there was a 6-year-old boy or so there, and we were walking up there, and I was in the front, and I said, let's all just shake his hand. He'll never forget us. So we all quickly stepped aside there, shook his hand. Dale was at the end, and the little boy wouldn't let go of his hand, and they held hands all the way up to the house. Sort of neat. He probably never saw this many white people before, at least not recently. So we get up there to the house, and the guy there with the black rings said he'd take us out to the road. There was police out there stopping traffic, checking papers. So we followed him out there, and about that time, Phil and Barry pull up in their vehicles. We jumped in. 20, 25 minutes later, we were back at Cam, and that was pretty exciting. Ray was there. Finally, his family was together for the last 2 months that they had been separated, and he was all excited, jumping around, yodeling, and we were all just really excited. So yeah, that's sort of how it ended. Amen. We left later that evening on a Coast Guard plane and ended in Miami. The next day we spent interviews with the FBI and just sort of closed the case. And then the next evening I flew to Tennessee. So thanks again for all your prayers, all your support, and coming out. God bless.
It's short. Don't want to keep you here too long. But just sort of from our family perspective, and then also just a few things about what was happening on this side with the negotiations and some of those things, what happened there. So from our family, one thing that my mom always said was whenever we were down and we needed a lift and encouragement. It was always somebody or a text or a call. God would always come through, whether that was through family or friends or even just reading or God himself. So those were always at the right time. They were right there for us. Cam did have conference calls with the family. There was a couple members of each family that were allowed in the conference calls. First, they started off twice a day. They would just update us. Barry was sometimes on the call, Phil, a few of the guys down there, and also some of the Cam board in Ohio. They'd keep us updated where they could. They weren't always sure what was going on either, and so sometimes we weren't always sure what was happening. But those calls were very encouraging. I know my mom's days often revolved around those calls. Those were often encouragement as well. So normal life still had to go on for us, though. Well, whatever I knew this normal was, still had to keep going. Still had life to do here, but yet that was always in the back of your mind. We did get proof of life. We knew at some point that they were okay, that they were all together, but yet they didn't always get proof of life every time they were in contact. In the first 8 days especially, we weren't sure if they were all alive or not because there was no contact with the gang during those times, during those first 8 days especially, and so it was, we weren't sure what was going on. And also during this time, we were not allowed to share any details, and I know that was hard for us and hard for you, especially as family and friends and people that truly cared. There's questions, and we were like, sorry, I can't, we're not allowed to share. We were strictly told by the FBI and the State Department, those don't share. They don't want this out on social media. And I understand that, but yet it was really hard to not be able to share, especially family. There's something about being able to share and have other people knowing what's going on. So those were times where we would feel alone. And again, I apologize for the times that I just had to say, sorry, I can't say, even though I knew more than what was going on. Just a couple details, try to fill in some of the negotiations, things that were happening. Barry did also share a report, and I would encourage you to listen to that one if you want to. I believe it's on YouTube. Very good. Have more details than what I have, but I'll just try and get some of the main ones. So a lot of these details come from his report as well. So it was from his perspective. So right after the kidnapping, the gang leader did call Barry from one of, I believe it was Ryan's phone, and he told him, I have them, they're in my hand, they're in my control. It's not going to be a long process, maybe just a day or so, but he wants $1 million for each one or he'll kill them all. And so Barry right away was like, we're not going to give you anything. It's not how we do. You have the wrong people. These are God's children, and we're not going to do that. The leader just screamed, money or they die, and then he hung up. And so Barry figured they had about 24 hours or so till the leader would call back, but actually went 8 full days with no contact until it went, those 8 days until there was contact again made with the gang and they were able to talk with them. During this time, there was all sorts of meetings, and the FBI was involved. There's agents that flew down into Miami, the State Department, the Haitian officials were all there as well, and so it was a lot of just different things going on. Barry did have, agents to help him with the negotiation, what to say in this, and but along with that, then there was also lots of varying opinions and advice, and so it was a lot of just some hectic times there as well. There were also FBI agents up here in the States who met with a representative from each family and just, said, hey, we're here for you, we'll help you out, we'll do what we can for you, and they did very well with that. So then with the negotiations, try to briefly here, Cam has a no ransom policy, and even with that as a family, that's a hard decision. especially once it's your brother. That can be a pretty hard decision. But eventually, and this was more like the CAM board and some of those decided that they would offer food boxes for the group instead of money. Not everyone was in agreement with that decision, but it ended up being the decision that was made, and so that did not go over well with the leader at all. He basically said, "I didn't ask for food boxes," and hung up. And so after this, some of the negotiations weren't seeming to go as well as before. And it even came down to the point that, well, maybe there should be money involved. There needed to be money offered. The FBI kept saying it, and others kept saying too, if there's money involved, if there's money offered, shouldn't go less. It should be a week or less time till they would be released. Which that confused us a little bit as well, because we heard the U.S. has a no ransom policy, and I think they asked the agents that, and they said, well. They do, but that is just the title. They say money makes things happen. So there was a lot of decisions and different emotions going on during that time. Eventually, it was decided by CAM to turn over the negotiations to the FBI, and the FBI had a third-party negotiator that they turned it over to. I'm not here to say one way is right or wrong, but not everyone was in agreement with that as well, with that decision, but that's what was decided. And then after that, we didn't hear as much from the FBI because they were the ones that were doing the negotiating. So the conference calls weren't off, and we were sort of in the dark after that as far as what was happening. We were pretty sure that they knew where they were. We didn't know about the planes circling. Weren't sure. But we were pretty sure that the FBI has ways of finding out where they were. And every now and again, we had a proof of life, and so that kept us going with a little bit of hope as well. The FBI also did have some conference calls with us as families, but those were not even once a week, I don't think. And so the process just kept getting dragged out. And that's like Steve said, there was times where it's like, oh yeah, Wes is kidnapped, or even us I guess for myself, you move on with life, and Thanksgiving, and it's a busy time, and sometimes it's almost like, oh yeah, Wes is kidnapped, but yet it was always still there in the back of your head. You'd always think about it. The FBI then told us that they kept telling us it won't take long. There's an anonymous donor who agreed to supply the funds. They would have them out soon. And so on November 11th, Barry actually got a call from the FBI saying tonight is the night. They've agreed with the hostage takers. Get ready to go pick them up. And so Barry was getting ready to do that. About 40 minutes later, the FBI called back and said, never mind, the gang called it off. So there's kind of a low and a high, and then a pretty low after that as well. For us, we thought, well, surely by Thanksgiving, Wes would be home. This is 1st of November. We thought surely by Thanksgiving. The FBI kept saying, it doesn't take that long. In fact, during this time, they even told us that they had successful negotiations with some members of the same gang for other people. So they had kidnapped some others. The FBI had negotiated for them, had delivered the ransom, and they were out. And so for us, we were like, well, so why not ours? Like, what's taking so long for ours? There were doubts and fears that became more real for us during this time as well. When the two hostages were released, there was some encouraged. We were a bit encouraged. We were like, hey, maybe we'll get there. But then didn't hear much after that, and so it kind of went back down for us. There were times where I was like, okay, it works in the movie, so why can't I'll just pack up and go get him? Because you kind of have that, why doesn't the U.S. do something or whatever? But again, those are not, God was working, and that only works in the movies anyway. So on December 4th, Barry got another call from the FBI, and they said again, all right, we reached another agreement with the gang. Deal is struck. The drop is being made. The drop is being made tonight. Get ready to go pick them up again. And so Barry got everything ready again. About an hour later, they called and said, never mind. They changed their mind again. They went back on the agreement, even though we gave them the money that was agreed upon. The next day, however, they did release the three of the hostages, and I think part of that was due to health, but also technically there was some of the money given. But now their demands had changed, and they had their overall leader of the gang, before the kidnapping had happened, I believe, he was arrested, and he was sentenced to life in prison. So their demands now changed from money to they wanted their leader out. And even though he was in prison, he was still in control. He still was definitely in control of the gang, at least to some extent. Well, I mean, the FBI couldn't do much about that. That was up to Haiti. The Haiti government said, no, there's no way that's happening. And so one of the last phone calls toward the end at least, they had said no more. They said nobody else is getting released until their leader's out of prison. And they pretty much cut off all communications with the FBI after that. The FBI even had come out and they were like, we don't know what to do. This should have worked. It was supposed to work. We had an agreement. They were sort of down themselves. The last phone call we got from the FBI, you could tell that they were just not. They didn't really have a lot of hope for us. They weren't sure what to do. The only other step would have been a tactical assault. But even the FBI even said, if it goes well, 2 of your hostages will be killed. That's if it goes well. And so we obviously didn't want that. We wanted God to receive the glory for when they're released, not the military or anybody else. And so it seemed at this point, our sides, the FBI, whoever's Cam, there was nothing more you could do. Like, we were pretty much at a standstill at that point. Every time you seemed something good would happen, it would just hit a brick wall. And I don't know how God is thinking or whatever, but it seemed like, once we physically did all we could and then still didn't work, God was like, it's all right, just give it to me. I have it in control. Now, again, faith, not saying that faith is doing nothing. That's not what I'm saying. We need to do our part. Sometimes we have to take that step, but it was just like God was saying, hey, just let me. I've got it. I can do things you can't. The FBI can't. So by now we were hoping and praying that he'd be home by Christmas. First it was Thanksgiving. Now it's like, surely by Christmas he'll be home. The closer it got, the more I was getting discouraged. God had worked a miracle. My brother-in-law from Belize had been able to get a visa for the first time after being denied a couple times. And so their whole family was up, and we were all together, and we were going to be together for Christmas. And been the first time our whole immediate family would have been together in about 7 years. But Wes wasn't there, and we weren't sure if he was going to be home or not. So then, on the morning of December 17th, my mom woke up during the night about 2 o'clock in the morning, and she couldn't sleep. So she went out to the bakery that she has there at home. They have a bakery that they do. And she was like, well, I may as well just go work. So she went out, started working, getting ready for the day's baking, and she was just feeling an urge to pray and for Wes and the others right there. And so she did. She was really praying. And during that same night, my sister Carol had a dream that Wes was free and safe somewhere in the States, and felt really real to her, but she didn't want to wake up from it. When she did, it was kind of a reality check, and so that was not a very good time for her. Later that morning, my mom went to read her Bible and just opened it, and it opened right to the story of Peter's escape from prison. And so that was an encouragement to her then. But little did she know that story was being played out right at that very moment with Wes as well right then. So around 8:20, Mom got a call from a Haiti number, which was kind of strange, and so she stepped outside for better service and answered and thought she heard a little hello, but she couldn't really hear much else, and so eventually got disconnected, and then a little bit later she gets a call from an Ohio number, and so she was like, okay, probably has something to do with Wes, and so she stepped outside and answered again, and then she heard a voice clearly say, "Hey, this is Wes," and she recognized it right away, knew it was him, knew it wasn't just she knew it was him right away. Her heart and adrenaline started racing. Then when she talked with him, she found out he was safe, and they were all at the mission base. And then Carol was helping Mom in the bakery as well, and she was watching her, and she thought Mom was sort of losing it by the way she was looking and acting. And then all of a sudden, Mom came bursting through the door and screamed, praise the Lord," as loud as she could. At that point, Carol thought Mom had lost it for sure. So then when Mom explained what had happened, he was free and safe. Carol had her own emotions to go through at that point because she just dreamed it and then had a reality check, and now it's like, well, is she just dreaming again or is it real? And she's not one to show a lot of emotion, but Mom said you could just see it go right through her. So, yeah. Carol called me at school then a little bit later, and I couldn't answer right away, so I called her back over break. And just like hearing it, I was like, yeah, right. Are you sure? And I didn't tell her that, but that was kind of my thoughts. I was like, and then she was like, yeah, like we talked to him, and just I don't know, just the joy that came with that was quite surreal. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to say it at the moment, so I had to sort of regroup, and my students were coming back up from break, and so I couldn't just I didn't know if I was allowed to tell them or not, but pretty soon later we did find out that we were allowed to say that, and so then I was able to share it with them, and finally was able to tell someone good news. And then we were all able to be together for Christmas as a family, and that was really, really special for us. The FBI later did say that the FBI said that this will go down as one of the most spectacular escapes in history, just because of how it happened, the size of the group, there were children involved, things like that. They called it one of the most spectacular escapes. And they also had no idea, if I understand correctly, the FBI did not really know that they were planning an escape. And so when they found out, they were all excited as well. They were there was a lot of rejoicing with them, for sure. One of the agents also said one of the FBI agents also said, we aren't supposed to take sides as far as religion, but from now on I'll be on your side. When you guys pray, things happen. And so yeah, that's quite a testimony that we have from that. So again, yeah, thank you, especially family, home church here, for your support, your prayers through all this. It means a lot. I don't know that you'll ever know how much it meant to us during the time, especially when we sort of silent encouragement at times because we weren't allowed to share things. And so yeah, just I guess I can't say thank you enough for that.